everyone's having a pleasant day. We're driving through something called the Fish Lake National Forest here in southern Utah this morning, headed east on Interstate 70 toward Denver. And we're about 400 miles from Denver. About a 6-hour drive from here. No big deal. And the question has come up a lot of times over the years: how much of a trailer can you safely tow with a light-duty pickup? And at what point should you ditch your F-150 or your Ram 1500 and step up to a heavy duty? And that question has been asked a million times, and a lot of different people have answered it in a lot of different ways. And up until we took this trip, we're about 3,500 miles almost into the trip that we're on in 6 days. Up until we took this trip, we would have said 6,000 pounds is probably the most you should have hitched up to an F-150. If you're going up and over the mountains. And after taking this trip, it's completely changed our outlook. And the reason why is because we've got a 28-foot Featherlight gooseneck trailer hitched up, and on the way out to California from Michigan, we had it loaded to 8,000 or 8,500 pounds. And it was almost an experiment, and we were not sure how well this truck, this 21 F-150 with a 3-liter diesel, and the towing package, but not the max tow package, and obviously not the heavy-duty payload package, how well this truck was going to be able to, and how comfortably this truck was going to be able to get that trailer up and over the Rockies. And we took the easy way, which is through Wyoming, instead of through Colorado on I-70. And it's just a lot smoother in terms of the up and the down grades, and you're not going through 11,000 foot mountain passes. You're going through like 7,000 foot mountain passes, or maybe 7,200. And so Interstate 80 is a lot less painful of a drive than I-70. It's also a lot less scenic. But again, we kind of took the easy way and the safe way, the conservative way, at least getting out to California. And what we discovered is that an F-150 can comfortably, not just safely, but can get an 8,000 pound or 8,500 pound trailer comfortably up and over the Rockies without really breaking a sweat. Going uphill, yeah, you're going to be down to 8th gear, 7th gear, 6th gear, and sometimes even 5th gear. But even an underpowered version of the F-150, which is what this is, this only has 250 horsepower, is not going to have that much trouble getting an 8,500 pound trailer up and over the Rockies. Every F-150 that's not powered by the 5-liter Coyote V8 has forced induction. And so the high altitude isn't going to give you really a loss of power in any appreciable way, like it would with that V8. Or if you had like the 3.3, the base V6, which almost nobody ever got, which is why they got rid of it. Part of why they got rid of it. But that's not an issue. And again, even the so-called underpowered 3-liter diesel with only 250 horsepower, and worse yet, the 331 final drive that this truck has, it still was able to get this trailer up and over 7,000 plus foot mountain passes without too much drama. And as long as you carry enough momentum into the uphills, like see, we're about to head uphill here, up a very not that long of a rise. And as long as you carry enough speed into the uphills and you lock out the upper gears of the transmission using the buttons on your shifter. And this truck has the column shifter, which is 1,000 times better than the console shifter. And the first time we ever saw a console shifter, which was in like the 2004 F-150, we thought it was a dumb idea, and nothing we've seen in the intervening 20 plus years has changed our minds. The shifter belongs on the column. So you can put all your soda bottles and Twinkie wrappers and all your other junk in the console. But as long as you pay attention to what gear you're in and you downshift as needed manually to keep those RPMs up over 2,000, you can make it over, I'm just going to say, any length of incline and any steepness of incline. The legal limit on how much of a trailer you can tow is it's made up of three things. You got your GVWR, gross vehicle weight rating, which is the max you can have on your front and rear axle, or otherwise known as the drives and the steers combined. And that's printed on the sticker in the door of your truck. And then you got your GAWR, the gross axle weight ratings, which are the limits of your front or rear axles. And it's possible to max out the GVW even without maxing out one or the other of your drives or your steers. And so you got to be conscious of that fact. You know, on this truck, the max on the drives and the steers on each individual axle is around 3750. But if you max out the individual axles, you will more than max out the limit for the total limit for the truck. And so be conscious of that fact. And then the third one is the GCWR, the gross combined weight rating. And that's the legal limit that you can take the truck and trailer combined up to. And the problem with that number is that it's going to be difficult to find that number if you don't know where to look, because it's not printed on your door sticker, as it should be. And I know a lot of newer trucks are starting to have that, like the, some of these heavy duties, which can take like up to a 30,000 pound trailer. And the manufacturers are getting a little more conscientious about telling you, hey, you got a GAWR of like, on our Super Duty, it's like 5,500 on the front, I think, and 9,900 on the rear axle. And then the gross combined weight rating is 40,000, which means you can tow about a 31,000 pound trailer. But you're not going to know that final number, GCWR, unless you go digging for it most of the time, because most of the time the manufacturers are not going to print that on the door sticker. And it's not entirely clear why. But those three numbers make up represent the legal limit, which you should absolutely never exceed if you know what's good for you. Because as we've said many times, the first time you run a church bus full of kids off the road, the first question anybody's going to ask you is, okay, show me your weight ticket and how heavy were you loaded? And the problem is, if you've been asking ChatGPT what the max trailer is for your F-150 or your Super Duty, ChatGPT or the Google AI or the Gemini or the Grok or any of these AIs will very confidently lie to you about the max trailer. And we know it because we've asked all the AIs the same question, knowing the answer already, and almost none of them have ever given us the correct answer. And so that's an easy way to wind up tragically overloading your truck and trailer by asking the AI. What you need to have is something called the towing guide, and that's like a PDF generated by the manufacturer that shows you for every single cab and bed configuration, for every trim level, for every rear axle, for every engine, for every transmission, for two-wheel drive, for four-wheel drive. It'll tell you the GAWRs, the GVWR, and then the gross combined weight rating. And unless you take the time to do that research in detail and then cross-reference it, you could wind up steering yourself tragically wrong. But again, for this truck, to go back to the question, we had always thought, 6,000 is about all you should hitch up to an F-150. After this trip, and after we've taken 8,000 to 8,500 completely comfortably, not just safely, but comfortably through the Rockies in Wyoming, that has really changed our outlook. Never had an issue where we had to get on the brakes and felt like we were not going to be able to stop the truck. Never had an issue where a crosswind, got a hold of that trailer and started making it sway on us and try to put us into a ditch. Never had an issue of the engine overheating going up a steep incline. And that can be an issue because of the fact that the air gets super thin as your altitude gets higher. And thin air is a lot less capable of cooling your engine than thicker low altitude air, regardless of the temperature. Even in the colder seasons, thin air, it just has like a lot less density, and there's a lot less like air mass going through your radiator. And so if you're chugging away at like low speed with low airflow going through that radiator, trying to get up a steep incline, even in cold weather, you might start to overheat at the higher altitudes. So keep that in mind, and the manufacturers take account of all that when they set your GCWR, because they do a lot of testing, on like the so-called Ike Gauntlet, which we're going to be on later today. Or if you've ever gone like north out of Baker, California on Interstate 15, headed up towards Vegas, and you're going uphill on a moderately steep incline for 15 plus minutes, and it's 100 plus degrees, and you're at like 2,000 plus feet elevation. Yeah, that we have been in a vehicle that came close to overheating on that exact stretch of highway, and it was our 04 Expedition with only like a 3,000 pound trailer. So just keep all that in mind, and number one, make sure you're legal and not overloaded, because the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they buy their F-150 that the advertising told them could tow 14,000 pounds, or 13.5 these days, now that the heavy-duty payload package has gone away. If you see that little terrain feature there, we've driven by that thing a million times, and it's always kind of startling or striking each time you see it. And again, this view here, by the way, going through southern Utah on I-70, indescribably pretty. And the entire drive from Denver to Vegas is one of the nicest drives you're ever going to take. It's only about 12 hours, give or take. And you go past like Moab, you go past Arches National Park, you go past Zion Canyon or Zion National Park, all those, the Big Six, I think they call them, in southern Utah. Indescribably pretty. And everybody ought to do it at some point. But in any case, people will listen to the advertising and they'll get in their minds that they could tow 13,000 or 14,000 with their F-150, even with a ton of options on it, and that's not true. And then they'll go to the local camper store, or Camping World, or whatever you call it, and the salesman will get them into a 32-foot camper and say, oh yeah, you're not going to have a problem towing this thing with an F-150 because that EcoBoost has a ton of power, and oh yeah, you're going to have no trouble at all. And yeah, it might be over your hitch rating, but that's why God invented weight distributing hitches. And that's how people get into trouble, and that's how people wind up jackknifed or upside down or in a ditch. And so, as we were saying before, as long as you carry enough speed into these uphill inclines, it's just not an issue. The truck's going to downshift as needed. You might have to manually downshift it, but you're going to be able to keep a comfortable speed going uphill, even up a steep incline. You're going to have a little bit harder of a time accelerating uphill, at least with this engine. With the EcoBoost, the 3.5 or the 2.7, no, you shouldn't have any trouble accelerating uphill, even fully loaded, as we know from the Power Boost that we owned for a couple of years. That engine will have zero trouble getting you up to speed. what will get you into trouble, again, is being overloaded on your hitch to the point where maybe you don't have a weight distributing hitch and you're starting to sag and you're almost starting to drag that hitch on the ground and do the Carolina squat, and your front wheels are almost completely unloaded, and then you lose your steering control when you need it most. And that puts you off the road because you overloaded the hitch, because 99% of people have no idea how much hitch weight is too much. Because all they know is, well, I got an 8,000 pound trailer and the limit's 13,000. No, it isn't. You got to watch your hitch weight religiously, fanatically in a light duty pickup, because your hitch weight is the first thing you're going to max out. And your hitch weight's going to max out the GVW of that truck, the gross vehicle weight rating, and make you illegal in that regard, even if you're under the gross combined weight rating. So you just have to watch all those numbers, again, fanatically, and make sure, for instance, when you weigh in at a quarter of a tank, well, I'm 100 pounds under the limit. Guess what? When you top off, you've just added another 150 or 200 pounds of fuel. And now you've overloaded yourself and you're illegal. And again, it's not just about legal liability, and it's not just about avoiding a heavy fine or prison time. It's about trying not to kill other people on the highway, or yourself, or your family. There's a lot of news these days about CDLs, commercial driver's licenses, and there have been tens of thousands of CDLs given to people who were completely unqualified. The guy who killed 3 folks in Florida doing the illegal U-turn on the turnpike there, that guy failed his knowledge test 10 times and still got a commercial driver's license. And as we came to find out, had 0 English language proficiency, which is kind of important, when the road signs are telling you the inclines or the downgrades that are coming up, or there are heavy winds coming up. Kind of important to know when you're driving an 80,000 pound truck with hazmat in it on the public highways. And it's also kind of crazy to think that a private citizen with just a plain old operator's license, a plain old driver's license, maybe it's a 70-year-old boomer who's retired and wants to, live on the road for the next 10 years. And they can just go in, throw down the cash, buy a Super Duty, an F-150 with a 14,000 pound GVW and a 40,000 pound GCW, gross combined weight rating, and hitch up a 31,000 pound camper and head on down the highway. That's kind of crazy to think about, without needing a commercial driver's license. And then maybe they take their teenage grandkids out, for a camping trip, and then you got a 19-year-old behind the wheel of a Super Duty with a 30,000 pound camper hitched up to it. Think about that for a minute. But as we know, because we've got a Super Duty, that thing can actually comfortably and safely and confidently handle a very, very, very heavy trailer. But to go back to the question, before this trip, we would have said 6,000 is the most you should ever hitch up to a light duty, like an F-150, and take it through the mountains. After this trip, after making it all the way up and over the Rockies with no issues, all the way up and over the Sierra Nevadas, downhill through Donner Pass with no issues, even with an engine that doesn't really do a lot of engine braking, and is not set up for exhaust braking, with the turbo cinching down on those vanes and generating back pressure. We're just going to say 8,000 pounds is not a problem with an F-150. As long as it's a gooseneck or a fifth wheel, and it's a low profile gooseneck or a fifth wheel. And I'd go so far as to say, 9,000 pounds is probably not.
Proceed to the right.
9,000 pounds is probably not out of the question. 10,000 pounds might be kind of a lot, especially going up and over the mountains. But 8,000, 8,500, just not an issue. And 9,000 pounds probably wouldn't be either. We're gonna jump out here and show you what this place looks like. It's again one of the most amazing and scenic places we've ever been. And most people fly over it and have no idea what they're missing. And they spend their entire lives flying over it. Again, the Fish Lake National Forest. This used to be like the bottom of the ocean, you know, 10 million years ago or what have you. And now it's just this like amazing, extraordinary canyon where you can see like 10, 20 miles in every direction. Indescribably pretty. And there's the truck and trailer. You can see the axle, the rear axle, isn't even squatting. And the GVW on the truck, the 7,100 pound GVW, is fully maxed out. Well, almost fully maxed out. With 1,000+ pounds of hitch weight. It looks completely level. And so it's just not an issue. And we could not recommend it more highly. An F-150 with a gooseneck loaded to 8,000+ pounds. You wouldn't have any trouble with 9,000, and you might be able to get away with 10,000 comfortably. Maybe we'll find out next time we load up. So put this on your bucket list. I-70 through Colorado and Utah. Preferably during daylight hours. Or early morning hours. Yeah, the F-150 has absolutely blown us away with its total confidence, its total comfort, its total safety, and its ability with just no drama to accomplish tremendous things that, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been absolutely out of the question for an F-150 to handle a trailer of this size. And these days, it just handles it with no issues. And what we kind of wish, though, was that the truck was better at warning the average citizen if it was approaching an overload condition, because it's got height sensors, you know, like ride height sensors, and it's got throttle position sensors, and so it can tell, it can sort of calculate without a lot of trouble, give or take, how heavy a trailer it's pulling, just based on how much throttle it takes to accelerate it. And it can tell, given the amount of braking force you have to use to slow it down. And all those things, it kind of knows the deal. And we wish the truck would have more safeguards in terms of warning the driver that there's a potential overload condition. And it really doesn't do that. It just sort of, you know, if you've got the hitch overloaded and it's sagging and it's practically dragging the hitch on the ground, it's not going to say anything. It's not going to complain, and that's a problem. Or if you've got too much hitch weight compared to the weight of the trailer, or too little hitch weight compared to the weight of the trailer, it's not going to tell you that either. And so, you know, what Ford almost kind of owes people, knowing that the limits of these trucks have just gone, you know, have continued to go up. It kind of owes you, especially in a place like the U.S. with the level of litigation that we like to put each other through. Ford would almost do itself a favor by putting a few more safeguards into the truck and having it be a little more conscious of how much weight it's carrying and pulling, in order not just to prevent lawsuits, but to keep people safe, keep the ignorant driving public, ignorant and ill-informed driving public, a little bit safer from the consequences of their ignorance, and not just themselves, but all the other drivers on the highway and their family members that they load into their vehicles with them. It's not a complaint, it's just an observation. You know, when 99% of humanity has no idea what the actual limit of their truck is, it's one thing to say, well, we put it on the door sticker, or we put it in the towing guide, and it's another thing to have the truck actually, you know, use all of its sensors and all of its ability to calculate and sort of in all of its inference and all those things, to actually do a little more good. And keep people from getting themselves into trouble. All right, I think it's all for now. And so once again, to answer the question, an F-150, with or without the max tow package, with or without the heavy duty payload package. Once you know what the limits are of your front and rear axle, and your GVW and your GCW, and you've got everything loaded properly, an 8,000 or 85 pound trailer is not a problem in the Rockies or in any other mountain range. A 9,000 pound trailer, probably not a problem either, as long as it's a gooseneck and a low profile gooseneck. And a 10,000 pound trailer might not be a problem either. At least on level ground, it definitely wouldn't be. And that's the answer as of now. We will give you an update once we get through the so-called Ike Gauntlet and run this thing through 11,000 foot mountain passes in the eastern half of Colorado. And maybe we'll tell you in a couple hours after we get through Vail Pass, Jesus, wouldn't want to do that again. But as of now, we're pretty confident with this thing and its abilities to get you anywhere you need to go. All right, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you later.